Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Inbal Weinberg. I'm the co-founder of the PDC. Very exciting to see everybody here. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about our organization, just as people file into this webinar. We are a group of production designers worldwide. We've come together to create a collective about more than 1,000 members from various countries around the world. We're all designers, mostly working designers in film, TV, commercials. And we love talking about our craft and we love sharing experience and advocating for our position and our craft. So in today's webinar, our advocacy group, of which we have here Miranda Cristofani and May Davies, have suggested a very important topic, which is kind of the topic of self promotion. And we want to speak to our agents who are also sponsors of the collective about their experience and their advice. So I will just hand this over to Miranda and May to introduce the session in more depth, and just wanted to thank our panelists and everybody that's here listening. And we can't wait to learn some great proactive tips at the end of this. So over to you, Miranda.
Thank you, Inbal. Very happy to be here. Really wonderful to see everybody. We're gonna start in true fashion with our land acknowledgement. Then we'll go into a bit of the mission on the International Advocates of the Production Design Collective, and get into some introductions for us all. So with that, I will start with the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that as we meet today virtually from across the world, we are all gathered on the traditional lands and territories of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands throughout generations past and present. Please take a moment to honor the ancestral grounds you reside, design, and live on, and pay respect to those that are original occupants of our vast and beautiful landscapes. Thank you. So the IAPDC, which stands for International Advocates of the Production Design Collective, are a community of production designers from around the world advocating for visibility, collective progress, and recognition of production design through sharing of information, transparency, collaboration, education, and shared passion for experience. Embracing inclusivity, tenacity, and seeing differences as opportunities for growth, the IAPDC empowers the future of production design. So I'm going to get into introductions. We have one of our moderators couldn't make it with us today, Fiona Donovan, which, as I'm sure most of our collective know, they've seen her before. She's very instrumental in our group. So we want to just acknowledge her as well in these introductions. So Fiona Donovan is a Sydney-based AACTA award-winning production designer with over 3 decades of excellence in film, television, and theatre. Her meticulous world-building eye is heavily informed by her foundational degrees in architecture and set and costume design. Renowned for her celebrated work on projects like A Place to Call Home and the recent feature, The Correspondent, Fiona also serves as president of the Australian Production Designers Guild, the APDG. Her deep understanding of visual storytelling makes her perfect guide for today's discussion, but she will be missed. Miranda Cristofani, that is me. I'm an LA-based production designer and a member of the board of directors at the Art Directors Guild. I bring a sharp collective perspective to today's panel, rooted in, I'm going to change to third person, her own background as an artistic director and designer, with credits including award-winning film Honor Student and J-Lo's This Is Me Now. She has experience shaping the visual narrative of commercial and narrative projects. Miranda understands firsthand the nuances of creative collaboration, high-level styling, and design execution. Her practical industry knowledge allows her to bring the gap between our expertise panelist and the audience, keeping the dialogue highly relevant to working creatives. And we have joining us today, May Davies. May Davies is a London-based production designer and art director whose scenographic approach is heavily influenced by her background in fine art and theatre design. She has an impressive portfolio spanning independent feature films, live performance, and major television projects like Black Mirror and the BAFTA-winning Landscapers. May is also deeply committed to industry mentorship and community engagement, making her a highly empathetic and insightful voice to steer today's interactive elements. And I want to get to our guest today, our wonderful agents. We are really thrilled today to welcome Mary Young, an agent representing below the line talent at the global entertainment powerhouse, WME, which is William Morris Endeavor. Mira specializes in advocating for the industry's top production designers, cinematographers, and editors. With a strong pulse on the evolving landscape of visual media, she offers a strategic look at what it takes for designers to navigate the market, elevate their digital storefronts, and build a sought-after professional brand. Welcome, Mira. And we also have joining us Britt Andres from the Magnet Agency. Joining us, an industry leading firm known for representing top tier creative talent is Britt Andres. Britt brings a wealth of experience in the creative and commercial sectors, offering unique insights into the nuances of brand partnership, creative management, and the business strategies that help visual artists push into higher budget tiers and new genres. So welcome, Britt. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to get started today. So, May, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, thank you so much, Miranda. One of the things that I love about the collective is it provides a space for designers working across all sizes of projects, from very experienced designers to emerging and new designers. And we have a very international audience. So we wanted to begin this session before we dive into some of the specific questions we've got with a bit more of a general question to both of you. What do you enjoy most about the agent designer relationship, and a little bit about your backgrounds? How did you get to where you are today?
Mira, do you want to go first or do you want me to start? Okay. So I suppose in terms of the Magnet Agency, I've been working there for 12 years. It's gone fast for sure. And it's great. I think like all of the people that I work with and all of the set designers and production designers and the people that, that we've come up together has been amazing. And I think that being able to see artists that started, I suppose, on the roster, 12 years ago and seeing where they are now and that growth, which I would say, it's a partnership. So it's not all me, and it's definitely collectively getting them to where they are. And I think that for me is one of the best parts of the job, or if not the best part, is working with people that are so passionate about what they're doing that they're, spearheading their careers, and also, I suppose, hitting the tiers that they want to. And I think that's, what we're about. And I've been here at Magnet for a very long time. I started assisting in set design and then transitioned over, 14 years ago, I think it was. And I haven't looked back, but I've got full respect for everything that the production designers do, and the stress about like not getting the perfect chair or not getting your budget signed off. Know firsthand how stressful that can be. So that's from me.
Hi, everybody. And thank you, May, Miranda, Fiona, and Inbal Weinberg and the PDC for inviting us all here today. And I just have been extraordinarily lucky to be doing what I love for 20 years as an agent. I have a fine art background. So from day one, I've been working with designers. I would say the through line for the creatives that I work with, be it designers, cinematographers, creative directors, or directors even, are that these particular people are creatives who execute. I think that it's is not just an idea person. It's really somebody who takes the understanding and articulation and execution of what they do in and what they're responsible for. And that's really what I feel like my sort of client roster represents.
Thank you. That's really interesting that you started in set design, Britt, as well. It's good to know. So we're going to move on to the first question about our narrative portfolios. As designers, it's really easy to put our most recent jobs at the top of our website, and call it a day, but that can sometimes lead to being pigeonholed, when actually the design process is able to pivot to different genres and different things that we might want to work with. So the question for both of you again, and of course, Britt, you can answer more from a brand and fashion angle to Mira, who's more feature film and TV drama. But when a designer does want to pivot, say from contemporary film to genre shows, how should they restructure their portfolio? How do they visually tell the story of the jobs that we want rather than just the jobs that we've done before?
Well, I would say that I would reframe the thought from being a genre specific kind of goal to thinking about aligning your taste level with the creatives that you may want to work with, or, the sort of field that you're thinking about. So that doesn't always mean put your first thing first. I think it is about aligning your portfolio with how your taste level is. And maybe that's grown, or maybe in the very beginning you had, that magical moment and collaboration that with a director like Inbal and Derek Cian-France, where that project should be front and center. I think that's really what I would think about when you're looking at your portfolio. It's not just chronological.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's kind of, I think if there's specific projects that are relevant to where you want to take it in terms of your career, it's about, I suppose, putting a spotlight on those, and then ones that either, don't bring you joy, or there's a lot of artists that we work with that don't necessarily like the image because they didn't enjoy the job, not necessarily because it didn't look great. It was more about the experience not being the best. So it's tainted the end result because of that. But I think that it's about what you're hiding or not showing necessarily than what you are. And I think that, I suppose, the relationship between the agent and the artist is to, I suppose, figure out what those images are or what those projects are that you're going to show as opposed to not. Um, and I would say that, with that, like the renders or references that are leaning more towards where you're trying to take your career are also kind of very important and can be used as a tool to kind of project that onto socials or, wherever that may be to try and get somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're mentioning, things like the renders or the visuals, because you're the ones that are pitching us in the room with, the producers, the directors, the showrunners, but you can really only pitch what we give you, right? So that sort of transitions really well into this next question, which is exactly what is the marketing ammunition, if you will, that you need from us on a regular basis. What's the difference between a client who makes your job easy or a client that, not makes it difficult, but, you're really having to tease out of them what you need to pitch them about the best. And what are those things? What are the things that you would love for us to just be handing over regularly?
Well, I think from I suppose our agency and the way that we work, I think an artist that we speak to that has a clear understanding of where they want to go, it's always easier to help. Or if they don't exactly know where they want to go, they have an indication of like the type of photographers or directors that they want to work with, and then see if we can, okay, look, like if we connect you with this person or there's a relationship we can form there. I think it's great. Like some of the artists that we've had in the past have done kind of boards that visually show the type of work that they like, regardless of it being theirs or not, to try and be like, okay, look, like they prefer to do this style of build as opposed to, um, a different kind of type, or they might be more prop styling rather than actual larger set build. So it's kind of seeing where those strengths are or where those desires are to kind of help on the agent side to get them to where they want to go. I think BTS, I would say now, and Mira, you might find the same, I'm not sure, is definitely a tool that people are using to be able to expose like the scale of some of these sets that are built, because a lot of the final images that we've seen recently where we know what's going on behind the scenes and it's this ginormous set, but the final video or film or image that you see is just a tiny and white corner, and it's devastating to see that that's what's left of this huge set. So I know that there's definitely been a uptick in BTS shots that the production designers have shown, which people love. Like I think that everyone's really intrigued by the BTS, to see what's going on, or the scale of things or how it was made. Yeah.
And I think in terms of specificity, that is really how we can help in the best way. And that's sort of understanding your taste and having that partnership where you're talking through the filmmakers and the recent films and the past films that you've, really been inspired by. And then we can have that conversation every single day, really, in our heads as we're thinking about you and seeing what's actually getting made and then making that kind of decision on how do we and get you in that chair. So I think what that means is really understanding what your vision is and being able to articulate it, which is why I said again, with the creatives I work with, I think we really are able to have that kind of conversation in a both artistic and professional way. And so then I can use the tools in my arsenal with my team and really try to get in the door in every which way, and all of that is if we have that conversation, that we have the right material to show too. So I think nowadays it really makes sense to take so many pictures, have someone filming you, have all of that data along with just what used to happen, which is you used to be able to just do your job. Now there's another job that you need to do, and it's quite a lot. We understand that, but if you don't have that in the background, I think then you can't point to it later because it ends up disappearing. It is what the creatives actually see on screen that they think you've done, not the entire story.
Yeah, fantastic.
And then once we are visible, so a director, producer, showrunner, they're going to, once they know about our name and are considering us for a job, they're going to look at our IMDb, our Instagram and website before a Zoom meeting. So how important do you think visual continuity is across these platforms? And from your perspective, what's the biggest mistake designers make when patching together a professional brand across the internet?
I would like to break it down into the three different ways that people are looking you up right now. IMDb is really the transactional. It's everything you've ever done. It's pretty hard to curate that. And I think that some people, I find I find that the longer it took you to go to the place that you are, obviously you have a lot down below that you may not want people to know, but you can't do anything about that, right? So we can clean up where we can, but that's transactional and people absolutely go look at that every single day. I think the website is the curated version, and that, of course, is where you should put a tremendous amount of your energy and make sure that it's up to date and it's not just the trailer when you have more that you can share. I think that that becomes quite an important. And now I think if you don't have one, it doesn't make any sense because you actually can code it yourself, create it. You can get more images than you ever have been able to before. I do feel like that is a place where you put your energy. And then the third is the social, the conversation that you're having. I do think that comes more naturally to some people than others. I don't think you should actually force it if that's not something that you're comfortable with. I think then keep it very professional to your website and, make the other thing just really, really personal. But if some people have been extremely fluent in having that conversation and using it in service of what they do, and that is the future. It's the future is now, as they say. And I think it is important to have that going if you're of that generation where it makes sense for you. And it's your ongoing POV. And I think Inbal was talking about this a little bit, that production designers tend to have something in common where they're not accustomed to talking about themselves so much, because really your craft is about servicing the story and storytelling. And so to put the spotlight on yourself is not something that always is natural. And so I think in that way, if you're using your social as part of your arsenal for work, I do think it should be a point of view on the art world or in film, and really focus on that rather than having too much of your personal life and family and things like that on it. I think if that's your decision, that's the direction that I would push.
Yeah, I think I agree with, what Mira's saying, that there should definitely be, I suppose, a tone to all of it collectively. Like, there's different places that people look. I think probably with social media and especially Instagram, there's definitely a few artists on the roster that don't enjoy it. A lot of probably artists that don't enjoy it necessarily, but it is, even if you're not posting, an important place for community. And I think to find people and to research and to see what people are doing, other people are up to, see what other directors are doing, I think it's a really good resource, even if your imagery that you're putting up or your posts or stories aren't necessarily like all work based. I think, like, with that, I think referencing or anything that's BTS or renders, it's also a platform for that. I would say that with the artists that we have, some of them don't have personal websites and just use the agency website as kind of like the big one that people use and look to. And so I suppose with that, like with having an agent and that relationship, we do work a lot with the artists to make sure that that is in line with what they, again, where they want to go and where they want to take it. And is also, I suppose, in the same way as the Instagram, it does flow. Like there is a tone, there is a voice, there is a style that continues on between the website and also their socials. And I think that definitely, like as Mira said, there's people are a lot more comfortable with it, or it comes more naturally than others. And it just can be there for used as a resource and a really good platform. But it definitely is still being used. I'm waiting for like that next thing that isn't Instagram. Don't know what it is, but hopefully it's out there and will be something else. But I think for now it's definitely being used as portfolios for a lot of the artists, and we use it as a resource to research and see what people are up to as well. And I think with that, like, yeah, it's definitely a here to stay. So I think it is important to have a voice tonally across all platforms, regardless what it is. If you can, IMBD, I wasn't familiar with the fact that you can't get rid of much on there. That's unfortunate. They need to fix that. But I do think it's definitely important to have a tone and a voice.
I think just a quick follow-up question, because I know there are some designers that have Instagrams that are purely just for their design, and then they have their own personal Instagram. And if you're political like I am, something that might be a good idea. So I'm curious if that's something that you suggest doing, or is it important to actually feel part of the designer's personality as well. I'm just curious how you as agents feel
The
about that.
way, the way I suppose with that we feel about it, or, I leave it up to the artist. If they want to have that political stance that's also, I know that agencies are very different, and with what's going on politically, it's very difficult to have different accounts. So it's kind of quite dual. But I think if they want to have one that expresses themselves as people and their beliefs that is in line with their, the work that they're also putting out, like, I leave that decision up to them. I don't want to be, or nor does the agency, stifling anyone's viewpoints, regardless of where they, I suppose, sit. So I think with that, like, yeah, some artists do like to have it separate. Some it's just one, or, that's just purely for work and they don't have personal at all. Yeah, from our side, it's kind of just what the artist prefers as to how they treat their social media.
You feel the same way, Mara? Just curious.
I don't get involved in what you want to put on your social media. I think it is your choice. Absolutely. That's why it's the conversation that you're having. So you're making the decision. You want to have this conversation with other people that may or may not know you in that way. And I think I respect that completely. I think that to have one that's just work makes it a little bit simpler, probably, because you're just putting out, things that you think, and you're curating your taste and your thoughts and your work and putting it in one place. That probably would be easier than mixing it all up in terms of tone.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thinking
So
just related to that one quickly before you
yeah,
move on. Do you think even a kind of professional headshot is a useful thing to have pop up across all your profiles? A kind of icon in your email and on your
On the
social
email,
media.
you mean a logo of some kind? That
Yeah, just often I guess often we're asked for a picture and it's always quite difficult to scrub through and find a good one. I mean, I don't know many of my colleagues that do sort of go for professional headshots. Obviously, it's much more common for actors.
well, there's
But
there's definitely BTS shots, and I personally do use photos of clients when I'm doing pitches because I think that it's important to talk about the 360 of somebody, not just what they've done and have just the resume. I think it's important to talk about personality and different relationships that people have. So I do put the picture. Um, so I would say yes, have some good behind the scenes photos of you on set. It's not you on vacation, it's really you as your professional self, I think.
in action.
Yes, yes.
I would, some of, just trying to think whether or not we do, or some of the artists tend, like, we do have some artists that have those kind of like professional headshots that are just used if there's press or they need to use them, but don't necessarily use them for like their icons on their emails or anything like that. Um, some people use their graphics of their, I suppose, their initials, but don't necessarily have logos or kind of like an identifying studio, kind of anything like that. Yeah, I think a lot of the time when we're promoting the artists, that a lot of it's, I suppose, work based. So it's more about the visual of the work rather than the visual of the person. For us, I'd say, yeah.
Great,
um,
thanks.
yeah, I think that's a good segue into our next question, which is, most of us um, here to, we're artists. We're here to make art. However we got into the art department, whichever way, there's several different ways we all got in, but we're not, we didn't go to business school. We're not salespeople. And the self-promotion part for us can feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit inauthentic, can be a bit scary for us. So we've talked about the visuals and what's great to have in our arsenal, but as far as our verbal soft pitch, like in general meetings or at industry mixes or even on set, how do you advise your clients to advocate for their brand and their business without coming across like we're always doing a hard sell, like we're always, trying to get us that next job? Can you give us a couple of pointers there for the soft pitch?
I think this is actually one of the most important aspects of what you are as a designer at a certain level. I think everyone does start like the bare minimum is that you're talented and you're an artist. And then after that, over time, it's really about how you manage that plus everything else. And to get to sort of the upper echelon of the profession, it is so much more about management and about self-promotion and about being able to articulate your vision to people in every area that you're working in. So I think spending the time in understanding who you are as a public speaker is probably one of the most important skills that a lot of people don't have. And I think the way to get to that upper echelon is if you spend a lot of time on that. And that's something you can actually control because you can practice and you can join Toastmasters and you can do that. And it really does help you in what you do because you have to command a crew of 300 plus at a certain level and have them all look to you. And I think that it doesn't start with just, you should say this in a pitch meeting. It really is your overall comfort on being able to talk about yourself, being able to be excited every time someone asks you a question. Our business is about excitement and it's about sort of passion and creativity. These things have to really be something that you're able to articulate, especially in these social situations. And I think once that spark is sort of not there, then you will not get the job. You will not be able to get that position that you've been looking for. So that's what I really feel like you have to keep practicing this skill. It's not something everyone can do. Absolutely not. It's something you have to practice and practice and practice, and then it will be second nature. But that I think is the best advice I could give, along with making sure that you're taking care of yourself in whatever way that is, like therapy or something, because it's such a people business that you will have to be able to have that positive, front at all times, really. That's sort of what the business requires. So I think take care of yourself in that way, but also figure out how you're able to really put yourself out there.
Yeah, I think Mira's right. It's definitely a relationships business, and that was drummed into me early on, that it is about your relationships with people. And I suppose with that, like I was thinking about this question in regards to like the soft pitch. And I think if you're starting out as a production designer or anyone, to be fair, within these industries, is that community engagement, going to openings, like being a part of a community is part of the soft pitch, like going to the film screenings or going to the book launches or book signings where you're going to find the like-minded people. Because I think that's the starting point, I would say. And it's your interest should be going to these things because it's part of the community that you're wanting, aspiring to be a part of. So I'd say, like, at any stage really, but especially for like just starting out where you don't know anyone and you want to start building on this career, I think going to those things, you do find that the same people that you saw at the beginning of us all, and probably their careers, you see the same people now. They might just move to different companies, or a producer 10 years ago might now be in a different position in a brand or an agency. So I think with that, like, that's a really good starting point to soft pitch yourselves in social settings. And I think with that, like, I think follow up is really important. I think if you're on set, or if you have a meeting, or if there is kind of, you meet somebody at one of these book signings or something like that, I think a follow up email or a follow up DM, whatever you feel comfortable with, is so important. um, to, I don't know, to just say thank you or have gratitude or leave a good impression on somebody, or, look forward to collaborating with them or working with them on something else. Like, I think that um, I suppose connecting in that way is just a way of, I suppose, pitching yourself, but not hard. And hopefully, like with that, you find like-minded people who want to work with you, and then you're coming up together or creating content together that makes sense. I think, yeah, for me, it's definitely about, as Mira said, relationships and people. So I think that we find a lot of the time that producers will say that, there's a lot of talented production designers, there's a lot of production, designers that are out there that can all do a certain level of job. But I think people just want to work with fairly easy people to work with. Not saying that, it's the jobs can be difficult, but I think that attitude that just makes everybody comfortable on a project, where there's artistic differences, fine, but just like we can find a solution, problem solving, I think goes a long way, especially when it comes to getting hired on a job repeatedly.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you mention some of the things like the openings, the book
Mm,
signings, the sort of social events that you get to meet other people at. I hadn't really thought about that till much later on in my
mm,
career. And once you do start
yeah,
putting yourself out there, it's a whole different, circle of soft pitching, really. Yeah.
yeah. And you find that the same, not the same people, but there is a lot of reoccurring kind of faces that you see that you might not know them, but you're turning up to these things repeatedly, that you do, just, which is nice. Like, then that you find a connection, and one of them later on the line you might actually say hello, and you just don't know where that connection might go.
Yeah, I've been talking with friends and colleagues about the importance of going to film festivals because it's not
Mm,
always obvious for production designers. And that's another great thing that the collective have started, kind of meetups at festivals and making space, taking up space
mm,
where we can. And that leads on to my question about awards, actually. But I just wanted to mention to the everybody listening as well, we didn't say at the beginning, but we will have time for some Q&A afterwards. So please do write questions into the chat box and
Into the
we'll
chat. Yeah.
reference them later. Um, but yeah, thinking about festivals. So awards, they're not just for our egos, they represent major leverage for our careers. Submission and for your consideration process can be quite overwhelming. It's a lot of time consuming work to put together all of those documents and to kind of navigate the timeline of talking about award submissions. So the question is what's the ideal timeline for a designer to start talking to you about submitting to awards? How should we be coordinating with you and the studio publicists or film publicists to make sure our work is seen by voting bodies? I don't know how much that affects
um,
you, Britt,
it's
but
less, yeah, it's less so for me. So I think, Mira,
I
is
was trying
something
to
that,
unmute. It's like
oh,
my so it has changed a lot over the 20 years that I've been doing this, definitely. And I think now what I see from where I sit is that if the studio or network is not pushing that particular show, it is quite difficult to get real traction. And I think you will understand that. And it's better to understand that from the beginning of the awards process than in the middle or at the end, because then you understand how much energy that you yourself should be putting into the situation. Otherwise, you're doing a lot on your own and not getting the support, and therefore, it really is the amount of dollars that the studio or network is putting toward the show that actually ends up helping it. It is very much a pay to play business, the PR business and the awards business. And so I think what can be helpful now is that we can have a conversation as an agent with the studio PR people that is assigned to that show and kind of see, okay, are they paying to put the show in for consideration for you or not? If they're not, you already have that information. They're not going to put money toward the show. And in that way, I still would advocate that you put yourself forward because you're having a conversation with your other colleagues in design. So they will see your name and know that you have work out there, but it would be pretty much insular to your community versus if a studio is putting in the nomination and then you know that there's going to be a campaign, we make sure that you have the PR uh, the PR support by the studio where they are actually looking out for you individually, then, there's a much better chance of it getting to the finish line. And I've now seen this over multiple cycles where you really need that support. So I think in terms of energy expenditure, I do feel like having uh myself, I would try and figure out with the client if there is attention to that show. And then after that, we can decide, are you bringing in a separate PR person for yourself? Or do we feel that the way the studio is planning their rollout, that you will have those moments and that attention in what it is? And, we just want to be really upfront. Is it a production design forward show? Is it not, and then we can have that conversation at that point.
That's really interesting. Have you ever known of a situation where you've been able to change a studio's mind? I mean, maybe it's a daft question because they would always consider every award carefully, but
They
is there a
consider
way of
every word
convincing?
carefully, but it's always whether the studio has decided they can spend more money at that point
Mm,
on a show that didn't do very well, I
Mm.
think I think it's really about that. It was about the amount of eyeballs that the show got or box office, and then you sort of understand, why
mm.
they've allocated their awards budget that way.
Because just as a slight side note, we have a sit in the UK, BAFTA Wales, BAFTA Cymru have just recently had to cancel their production design, hair and makeup and costume awards. I know it's devastating, Miranda.
Mm,
And the reason is because they're not having enough entries. There are very specific requirements for that award because it's all about being supporting Welsh talent and it's quite tight rules. But it is such a shame still, and it sort of makes we've had conversations in our guild about how to encourage the projects to submit production design. It's just very difficult, isn't it, to convince people to spend money when they maybe don't want to.
I think there's a finite awards budget, and so they're allocating it based on where they feel like they could get the most nominations or the most wins. If you look at it from their
Mm,
perspective, which is,
hmm
I sit in the middle, so I see what they're saying, I see what my client is saying. And so if the show hasn't had success, more than likely you're just putting it out into the void. So that's really why that's happening. But if a show is successful and it's not getting that push for design, that's a shame. And I think that's where you
mm.
actually do have power to go in and say, no, this should be put up for this category.
Yes, and maybe that's where it comes down to maybe people not understanding the amount of design that's gone into a certain show, if it's maybe more contemporary or naturalistic as opposed to fantastical. And I think that's
Exactly.
something.
That always is the difficult part. But if you, in the way that you were working, had all of the behind the scenes that you were showing the work and being able to have
Mm.
that, then that's something that you have as ammunition for sure.
I think that segues perfectly into this next question, which is, we're seeing that you can't really rely just on like behind the scenes stills. It's no longer just the stills of the showcase of the amount of production design work that may have gone into a particular production. It doesn't actually showcase the actual design. And kind of like we mentioned before, you know, you'll see a show and then you'll see the behind the scenes, and it's like, wow, there's all this. So with that in mind, you know, I mean, we're calling it the electronic press kit, but really it's sort of I mean, it is an electronic press kit, but it could be much more than that too. Is that now sort of non-optional? And when I say non-optional, I mean, like, it should we make it a requirement now that we do think about maybe hiring PR or doing, you know, trying to get as much of behind the scenes or the video, or, you know, including the renders, including the set design in a lot of other things, you know, in an electronic press kit. What specific assets, concept art, white models, before and after location shots, do you find the most effective in securing trade press and providing that scale for our work? That might be a very hard question, or a little long. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that there are two things, because I do believe that you should take this all of the background and try to and document your work, but there is a rule that you can't put it up yourself until perhaps the film is done and out. So you're doing this in the background, and potentially, if people of a certain level, we have been able to negotiate and say that said designer is taking BTS and will use it for their personal channels, but pat when release. And we've had to go back and forth about that. It's really about people at a certain level at this point. But we have talked about it because generally they say, no, you're not supposed to take any BTS, right? It's in the contract. So I do think I'm saying two things. It's definitely do that, because when you're talking about people that on-set photographers who are taking these photos, they're not doing it quite as much anymore either because of the cost. And then later, say the film or a television show is up for awards, you're at that point, then they want all of this, and you're like, well, if I hadn't taken this, you wouldn't have had it, you know? So you're sort of protecting that moment in the award cycle when actually they want all of the behind the scenes, the before and afters, they want to have the ammunition of what they're going to pitch you for these publications and what the story is going to be about. So I think the reality is you have to document all of it and then see how useful it is to you as you go forward. But I think the more you have, the better it is for you to parse out like what you want the story to be about your design on this particular project.
Britt, you got some insight for us?
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think as much as you can possibly get is going to be helpful. I think in terms of, I suppose, getting it into press, I suppose a lot of the jobs that we work on that are definitely a lot more fashion based, the turnaround on those is very quick. So I think with that, like already it's different because it's, we do a mix of fashion film and fashion stills if it's not longer form. So with that, like, it comes out very quickly. And I think because the end product tends to be, it can be either quite large and quite kind of embellished in terms of the set design if it warrants it, and you can see quite a lot, and the final image is enough to be able to showcase the work of the production designer, then it's great. But if, say, like there's instances where, I touched on it before, that somebody's built, a few rooms worth of production design, but you can only see a corner, I think that's where the renders and also the BTS is really important. Some of the artists in the past have, if they've built something of a certain scale, has done like a time lapse on their phone and captured the build and the takedown, which is, everyone loves a time lapse. So that's also like great to see because it's quite fun the way that it's animated in order to show the build and the takedown of a set. So I think, it's finding interesting ways to showcase. I think a lot of the content that we see now is all on the phone, and it's all quite small unless you're watching it at the cinema or you're watching it on your TV or your laptop. But a lot of the fashion content that we're involved in is digested on mobile phones. Not so much magazines anymore, but a lot more on the phone. So it's the way that it's being consumed is very different to how people used to. Like, we still enjoy getting the magazine in the office and flicking through the fashion campaigns that we work on. But it's definitely, a different way of consuming it. So I think with that, you're going to just see it in such a small format. So anything that the artist can have that can help tell the story of what they've actually done on that project is always going to be beneficial. And I think with that, I would say that, the importance of resharing, if there's somebody else has posted something from the BTS, or, again, it's back to social media, but if there is, somebody's sharing the credits and, you're then putting the story on, and there's a way to also increase the dialogue. Like, music videos is also a really good place to see the BTS. Like, if, artists that we work with do show before and after of large locations that have been dressed, and people do really enjoy it. It's not shouted about as it's being done on set. But I know that when press does pick it up, if it's a music video of a certain artist, then seeing the before and after and what that looks like once it's in a music video, like it does get a lot of engagement and people really enjoy seeing it. So I think that anything that you can gather, if the project warrants it, it's always going to be helpful to have.
Do you get a lot of requests for, EPK material? Is that something that still happens? Like, can we ask to put forward production designers material for EPK?
Sometimes, but not so much. Not so much at our agency. I think that the way that a lot of the artists do, I suppose, either get press or, if we need to do that, we don't get asked that often, to be honest, to put something together. It's more that people come and it's about the project, as opposed to an overarching, unless there's a profile done on a particular production designer. It's not that much requested, to be honest.
Right.
Do you think there's a value in designers almost running their own campaign? Because it would be fantastic if you're on a huge show that has decided to promote the production design and it's going into all the press, but maybe on a smaller independent film, and if you're not in a position to be hiring a publicist, is it worth putting together a kind of formal press release and sending it in? Is that something that you would get involved in, or is that sort of blurring the lines between publicity and being an agent? Has anyone ever done that you know of?
That hasn't happened. I think if you're in control of how you're putting your work out on your socials, if I do think that you should always do that. If you're talking about putting a formal press release and then sending it to different outlets, that doesn't actually work, I think, honestly.
You just wouldn't have the
Because it's pay
contacts
to
on that.
play. These places are IndieWire, Hollywood Reporter, all the places that the trade that you're wanting to have these articles written about you is pay to play. So it's changed over the years. That's why there is really this connection to how much the studio is putting towards it, that it finds success, versus the other way, which is, of course, when a show is just catching the zeitgeist, people catch up to it. Adolescence being one of them, it's dependent on how the show has done. It really is. But I think you can, as we talked about before, really control the way that you want your work out there. And I think in that way, spending your energy there versus trying to put it out into different, publications is probably the better use of time.
Yeah. Maybe in your hometown newspaper.
They would love to write about you, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah. But that leads really well into the last question that I have, which we have touched on a bit before. It's about the idea that maintaining an online presence, it does kind of feel like a second full-time job. Um, and it's so I suppose it's a question about do you have any practical strategies for designers managing websites and social medias? Are there any sort of visually dissatisfying websites that you see time and time again that aren't showing what you think the designer should show?
I think I when I see a site that really feels like the artist, that's when it stands out. I think when most people's websites are fairly follow like a generic model of this is my work and here are the trailers. I think for designers and cinematographers where it's something, creative and for the image, I do think curating particular stills rather than just having trailers is more beneficial in terms of how you can control maybe what the image from that particular film is. Maybe you don't want to put out there that you've done, a comedy or that genre, but you love the way that this looked or this particular scene, and you can control that, on what you are curating. So I do think that's really important. Um, and I think, again, when you're having the conversation with people online, what your work is and what your taste is not just your work, it is also trumpeting other people's work. It's also talking about, something that's inspired you at a gallery or at a museum. I think, when you're pitching yourself in general on a film or TV show, I think the people that are the most successful is when you're incorporating things that are just from different areas of the art world and not thinking just in the language of film. And I think that's how you're sort of communicating who you are and how you approach this visual medium. And I find that the most interesting.
Great.
Yeah, I suppose with that, Mira, like it is a visual medium, right? So it is about the imagery and I suppose what people see. So I think in terms of like a digital, storefront or what this looks like, I think it all needs to lend to the individual production designer or the individual artist. It just needs to resonate and speak to what that person wants to put out into the world. And if it's, getting tagged in a job that you worked on that you're not proud of necessarily, like untag yourself, make it less about, I suppose, those projects and not necessarily making it about the projects that you're not happy with or don't want to be tied to necessarily for those prospective kind of collaborations. So I think that it's really important, I suppose, tying back into community. It's and social media and this idea of, I suppose, a digital storefront that it's resharing and crediting the teams and I suppose having that dialogue beyond either the job or I think at our agency, like I really enjoy seeing all of the archival work that everybody's worked on and going back to the 2000s and just seeing like the amount and the abundance of work that's been created, especially now that the 90s and the early thousands are in. It's quite a fun, an exciting place to kind of be able to find all this amazing work that everybody's worked on over the years that, it doesn't matter how old it is, if we can champion it now, it's still relevant. It's still kind of, beautiful work that you can promote regardless of when it happened. So I think with that, yeah, I think we touched on it earlier that it's not necessarily about when it was shot. It's just about what it looks like and how it resonates. And, I think how proud the production designer is of it and the team around it. So I think with that, we'll always champion the work above anything else in terms of how it looks. Yeah, but it's a fun craft, and it's I suppose, yeah, same with Mira, very exciting to work with everybody that we do.
Right. Well, we just want to reiterate, please put any, we do have time for questions. I think we've gotten to that part of our panel here today. And I do see some in the chat, which I can go to, but there's also a question and answer section. So put your questions in there. I will say it's really interesting to hear about, us being sort of multi-dimensional and relying on things like art or other designers outside of film, and bringing that to sort of, who we are and how we do design. Some of the questions here touch on what you're actually looking for. So I'm actually going to combine two questions at the moment. So what are you looking for in new clients? What notable credits or style? And when's the best time to sort of start looking for an agent, I guess? Not straight out of school, but when you've got enough projects under your belt. And, you being agents, what are those things that you are looking for in a new client?
To me, it starts with excitement. It starts with excitement for the work that I've seen. And so that tends to be, if at an earlier level, it tends to be at Sundance, TIFF. It's very much a festival based in terms of film. That's where you end up finding discoveries and getting excited about the work and the person. And that's where you can meet somebody, as May brought up. That's sort of where you're having the conversation, understanding, okay, now I see the through line from the work to the person. And that's where, that partnership could start. I think before that, it's harder because it's a project that may not be in the mainstream. It may not have come out in some fashion. If we haven't seen the work, and we know it already, then we probably would not be at that stage yet. But I do feel like the way that you become a real production designer and start getting work is really because you've built the community that we've talked about. You built sort of the creatives that you're vibing with and growing with, and it will lead to that moment where somebody is noticing your work separately and specifically, and then wanting to get to know you. So I think that's the moment. Before that, it is harder to get seen. I think then you're sort of knocking on closed doors in a way because they haven't seen it. And I think we really have to start with the work first. We're starting with the talent and the work first, and then understanding if there's a chemistry between us.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, from our side, I think, there's definitely a lot of, I'd say, production designers that come up through assisting. And I suppose, a lot of the job, I would say nowadays, or, probably historically as well, is about problem solving. So I think that building a foundation, assisting is just such an important place to kind of be able to then start getting your own projects, to be able to then have those discussions about getting an agent. I think that, from our side, if there's somebody that's, I suppose, sent a CV and they're assisting and they're trying to develop their own portfolios, and they've started doing it for a few projects and they want to meet, we're pretty open, I would say, in terms of introductions, just to try and help people build on their first few jobs and portfolios, to just try and navigate and help them in a way that they want to go. But I do think, it's definitely, it's a hard slog to kind of get your jobs together to be able to then showcase them to an agency. And I think with that, that's, as I suppose Mira touched on, it's about excitement. If there's something in the work that, as an agency or an agent, that you see, you kind of like, okay, great, like let's build on this together, and then let's chat again in a few months' time and see how the work's developed. And then, I might give you a few pointers on a job that you're working on, and help. And it's quite, it definitely operates differently at different agencies. But I think it's quite a natural progression to then having the relationship of agent and production designer on the roster. Is just how I operate as an agent. So I think that it's just a very natural progression, and I think that's important to understand how each person works and what that synergy is going to look like. Because you tend to speak to your agent a lot, and it's really important. So I think that getting those first few jobs is important to kind of build on the visual that you want to put out there as a production designer, for sure.
I'd love to jump in with a question and taking it back into kind of the self-promotion world. I love that you guys talked about meeting people at film festivals or at book signings and being more proactive in how to speak to people about the work we do. And I want to take it back to the shoot itself. When obviously when we're working, I think you all brought up the various people that we can sort of make better contacts with. One is the still photographer that is photographing the shoot for the studio. Another is the EPK people who are coming to shoot for the studio. And actually, the studio execs or whoever from the production company is overseeing the project. How can we connect with them better, make sure that we have a personal connection with them, that we could go to them with requests to make them actually know us better. So I don't know if you have advice on that or more of such people that we can put in our sort of like as an aim or a goal to befriend, develop relationships with, I suppose, either on a shoot or off. But that's part of the kind of self-promotion skills that we can develop and be better at.
I think you're absolutely right, because what happens is you're so intense about doing the work and the job that you're not on set, you're not seeing them, you're at the next set. It's a particularly specific issue for production designers. If you're incredible at your job, you're not around everyone and no one sees it as much. So it is about planning out those days when you're having a conversation with the line producer. You have to have that person that you're mid tight with you, right? And you talk about the fact that, okay, let me know when they're coming to set, who's going to be there, and then you have to particularly make it a point to be there on those days. Yes, they need to see you. You can't see you do the job, you know? And I think that on those days, if you happen to be able to show them like what's upcoming and kind of get them on your side in that way, then it's going to be easy. But if they haven't seen you once while this is happening because you're so busy on the next 5 sets, which is your job, again, completely your job. But now I do feel like FaceTime is so, so important. It really, really is. And so you have to prioritize doing that and trusting some of your other team to be there. You're going to be here for 2 hours, making sure that you're doing that. So I think that was a really important and cool question, because it is at a certain level. You don't have to worry about that until you do. And when you do, you want to be good at it, which is how are you getting people to root for you? And that's because you're there because you're amazing. You're there because you deserve to be there. But they don't necessarily know exactly what you do. So if that's your job, you got to tell them what you do. I think you're muted.
To piggyback on that, I think that that's sort of where we as a community, maybe it's a stereotype, but we're a bit timid about, or maybe we feel like it's a kind of salesman mentality to go out there, and even being in front of the camera for EPK could be very difficult or intimidating for a lot of us. So how to feel more comfortable with being in front of the camera, interviewing for EPK, asking the still photographer to take a photo of you on set, or even walking the people from the production company or the heads of the whoever the client is for commercials, walking them through your set, making sure you're having a personal relationship with them. Yeah. So I wonder, for people who feel very uncomfortable with that, and maybe you've had those conversations with your own clients, are there practical tips to how to feel comfortable about self-promotion beyond
Absolutely.
the rational? Yeah, please
I
share.
mean, truly, and I touched upon this before, it's a public speaking skill set. And it serves you whether you can speak to 5,000 people at once or one. But it's a different skill set than just being yourself. Honestly, it is about repetition and kind of understanding what you look like on camera so you're comfortable with how your face is moving. You know, you're not an actor, we're not actors, but I think you should know when you do a certain expression or if you're speaking about something and maybe you fidget a lot, you know, you need to know that about yourself so that you can change it. Because you do have to be different on screen or in front of executives like that. Because their job is to project forward and their job is to be in front of people. And that's what they kind of expect to be reflected back. Um, and so that is something that you can personally work on, and it will help you in every aspect of your life. It really will. So if you prioritize that, it could start with actually say, you know, you're doing these panels and you're inviting other designers to be on them, and that's so great because it's helping everybody practice. It's really practice makes perfect. And you'll never be perfect. You never will. But again, the repetition makes it easier to not be perfect. You're just like, okay, I'm just going to let go because I've already rehearsed and practiced and I'm going to let it be. But you're going to be a lot better after you do that than not. If you go in just dry, you know, you will stumble. You won't be able to say the things that you were thinking about saying, you know? So I think that's my number one thing. You know, you get to a certain level, that is like the soft skill is the most important thing, actually, because you already have the talent inside. And then how do you project it out?
Yeah, that's
So
Perhaps
a
it's
cheap way to do that, actually, and I just forgot. The cheap way to do that is actually film yourself speaking and then watch it. Maybe, you know, if you're speaking on a panel like this, they very kindly gave us an idea of some of the questions. You know, if you have that and then you're sort of practicing what you're going to say, why don't you record yourself and then watch yourself? And you'll see, okay, there are certain things that I do that aren't what I would like to project. So then, you know, at least you know. And I think it just will help you in every aspect of your professional life.
yeah, that's great advice.
I think looking
Maybe.
after yourself as well in those moments, you know, when you have to do a public speaking thing, if you go in a bit tired or, you know, you haven't eaten something, it's so much worse than if you really prepared mentally and physically, I
Absolutely.
find.
And then also that very simple that advice to do the power pose, you know, just feel powerful in yourself and
Mhm.
then it projects better. I think those are all really sort of timeless tips because they do work. And I feel like some people carry the same person through their professional and personal life, but most people do not. You know, a professional aspect of yourself, you can think of if it's helpful, if it's not natural to you, think of it as you're putting on the cape, you know, you're becoming that professional person. And it does help, I think. It's just a different mindset switch.
These are all great tips for future sessions for us, Miranda, aren't they?
They absolutely are.
We'll do
Yeah.
some power pose sessions.
Power pose, cape building. Um, I'm gonna move on to another question from our audience, which actually, talking about capes and tools and things that we need that are sort of, but this is kind of touching on more newfound tools because of the changes in the industry, whether it's AI or recessions or, work moving worldwide and moving around. Are you seeing any new pivots or tools that production designers need to be honing in on, or doing going into the future that are different from say 10 years ago or today?
Mira, do you want to take that one
Britt,
first?
you can talk about AI, Britt. Bye.
Oh. Oh God. AI. No. I would say that I think there's definitely been a shift in the way that when the production designers that I work with present their work, then a lot of it you have the moving image render, I suppose, is one part of it. And you get to see like the whole, the lighting rig and the setup, which of course is down to the photographer or the director. But I suppose that experience of in being able to see it visually and in a video format of being able to walk through a set, we're seeing more of, I suppose. I think some artists vary in the way that like they like to communicate and keep it fairly analog because it's truer to who they are as an artist. But I think that probably lends itself more to fashion, film, and stills than it necessarily maybe with production design for film. Um, so I think it's definitely shifting, I suppose, in terms of like the 3D modeling and the type of technology that the artists are using, integrating, I suppose, as much AI as they want with their their toolkit in terms of, I suppose, their machines. I think there's been a different shift in that, and bringing on render artists is definitely, I think, a newer development where artists typically had a certain skill set and would do it themselves before. Now we're employing a lot more people to build these 3D models to then be able to present in their decks as they work on projects. So I think with that, that's most of the changes that we're seeing in terms of the use of the technology. I suppose with that, we get a lot of decks that are sent to us by art directors or creative directors that have AI models in them, saying this is what we want to create. And so it's how do we then, respond to that AI visual of how to actually physically make this thing a reality. And so I think the conversations have changed in the way being like, look, that actually can't be made. The way that it's been designed in AI physically cannot be made. So how can we design it in a way that it actually, would work in a physical space? So we're finding a lot, I think, of that in regards to the technology and AI and the fact that it will just, it's a tool that we'll use continually. But I think, yeah, it's a much larger conversation that I think probably, we're still finding our way in terms of the future that, I'm definitely not an expert, but learning, I suppose, as much as I can about it, considering the impact on our industries it's going to have.
I think I too think that at a level where you're considered an expert in your area, that your sort of interaction with the AI tools is what's going to be the thing that supercharges you in a way. Because then again, that's why I talk about creatives who execute. You understand that that image is possible or not possible. You're also creating things that are possible, really. That's really what it is. So if you're able to use it as a tool in order to get to the reality point or what is being able to be filmed or used, I think that's actually where you'll be able to be, looked upon and thought upon in the new entertainment world, whatever that is, that you have those skills to understand like what the benefit of using it is and what it's not. And then, the films that are actually using I think that's where we're having these conversations every day. I'm going in and understanding what the studios are doing. I'm having conversation with those executives. And I think the way that we want AI to be used is that there is a production designer involved in, the discussions of what is happening in these scenes, and also, in contributing to what will actually be there because they're doing the concepts and really setting the world and telling that story first before it's being rendered. And I think I'm having all these conversations every day.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having the conversations and putting that out there. Just personally, I don't know. I think maybe for everybody else on here, but thank you for putting, production designers should be included in the conversations or the rendering or whatever. So thanks, Mira.
Yeah,
Of course.
actually, I'd love to jump in for that because I think it's a great segue to asking you for us who have representation. Sometimes we feel like we're in the project, we're really busy, and we don't touch base, and or we don't know when to recruit you for our own self-promotion, whether we're on a project or off, I suppose. So I guess I would ask Mira and Britt, from your experience, at what point do you feel like designers should reach out to you for these things that we've been talking about? Like, do you give feedback on websites? And as Britt mentioned, actually, you represent some designers only through your website. And other things where maybe you're a great sounding board and your clients don't realize that you are that resource.
I think it's specific to sort of the partnership that I have individually with the clients. I think that's really it. Some people actually really don't want to be bothered when they're working. I know that because I'm trying to bother them and they will not call me back. And I respect that. I respect it completely. I think it's like everyone has their own process, and that's really why I'm good at what I do, because I understand each person, the person I'm talking to on the phone, the person I'm negotiating with. I know where they're coming from. So I honor that, and I will help where it needs to be. I don't think you need to have your agent be doing your self-promotion or be involved in that as much. Of course, they're pitching you. So it's like, if you want to understand how they're pitching you, I think that's the conversation, right? Which you deserve to have. And you can see like what they might be pitching you with, if that's something that you're interested in. Um, I've had people say, actually, I want this bio, and then we tried that bio, and then actually I realized we're not getting as much interest. So I would like to change it back. And then I've had that conversation too, because what you think you want people to think, and then what I'm looking at, because I understand the buyer, is what I think you have to understand too. We're on this side for a reason. We've done this for a long time, and we're constantly changing with the market too. We have to be. We're staying on top of how people are thinking about design and all the elements of what we do. So that's my answer.
I would say from, I suppose, the artists that we work with, if somebody, I've got a conversation that's going at the minute that's just, I suppose, fairly frequent, and it's just about, the next place for somebody to go, or where they want to take their career. They're at a point and it's like, okay, where do we take this? And I think with that, it's good to always have those check-ins, I think, with your agent, whether or not that's seasonally, or I suppose it depends on the time frame of pace of jobs. But I think it's always important, both from the aspect of the artist but also the agency, because it's kind of like you want to keep on invigorating or understanding why you're working together, and nurturing the relationship and helping somebody's career. And there's a lot at stake, being an agent and understanding the responsibility you have to help somebody's career, and that it's a partnership and that you're working together. And I think with that, like, checking in with your agent should be as often as you want it to be. But I definitely think it's a very strong partnership, because you're as strong as I am, and vice versa, in terms of where you're going to go. So I think with that, like, yeah, we do regularly speak to the artists about, like, why didn't you post that? It was great. Or here's the images, I'm going to feed it to you to make sure you do it. Not that that works all the time, but I try. And I think with that, like making sure that, the news section that we have on the website for the artists, say, that don't necessarily carry their own website, is updated. So at least there's some consideration being thought of, being like, look, they were promoting it. There's a good place for this. I think probably that the format of an agent and an agency has changed a lot with the growth of social media and the need for self-promotion with social media that wasn't there historically. So I think the demands and the role of an agent's definitely changed, I would say, even from when I started doing it. And I think that, I hope the artists lean on me as much as kind of like I get from them in terms of their creative. So I think with that, it's definitely, it's like, hey, I want that promoted, or I want that on the book. Like, can we do this? Then, we'll come in and do it together. I think there's definitely no perfect time. It's just about, I suppose, the relationship and what makes sense in terms of how often you want that conversation to be. And it's usually easier to have those kind of next step conversations when you're busy as opposed to when you're quiet. So at least it's kind of, you're looking forward as opposed to trying to rustle up some work because it's quiet. So, I'd encourage those to be during busy periods, actually, because there's an energy to it, and it's kind of you're feeding off the existing work. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, we're very close to our end here. So I think that might be all the questions we have time for, unless, Inbal, do you have any others you want to address?
No, great. I think it's a
Okay.
perfect way to end the session with really
Agree.
thoughtful replies.
Agree. We are so very, very grateful. Thank you so much, Mira and Britt. And, just want to thank also, WME and also the Magnet Agency. Thanks for being with us here today. And we do have another panel that is related to this coming up next. The PDC and the IAPDC are putting on another panel on May 16th, probably at the same time, around 3 p.m. Eastern. Check out the PDC website 360 for, posts of that, and it'll be shown on the Instagram as well. And it's called PDC Establishing Shots, Designer's Toolkit in Action. So this will serve as the boots on the ground practice follow-up to the agents, to our strategic seminar today. And while we're discussing what we need, this will really focus on the designers and how they actually get it done amidst our long shoot days. We are inviting to the table Jamie Lapsley, Diana Trulio, Mara Lapierre-Shoup, Tracy Collins, and Victor Malero. So please join us for that next one on May 16th. And again, just want to say a big, big thank you, Mira and Brett, and for our audience today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks so much. This was really, really informative. I'm very grateful.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.